Okay, so today we're going to continue with There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom. And yesterday, you'll remember we made a character web for Bradley. Okay, and you guys talked about a lot of different things about Bradley that you knew about him, and you made a lot of different connections. We talked about why he might have done certain things or felt certain ways. And we also learned about how his character is changing throughout the book. Okay, so when authors write, when Louis Sachar wrote this, he had to think about all those things before he wrote it. He couldn't just, write up anything and then there's a great character called Bradley. He really had to give a lot of thought to it. So when you guys are doing your writing too, I want to make sure that you are giving thought to your characters and to your writing, okay? And a character web is one great way to do that. Think about what you want in your character, okay? And think about how you want your character to change throughout the story. And that's not something that happens just all of a sudden. That's something that takes time, right? Good writing takes time. Some books take years to write, sometimes even 10 years. Okay, I don't know how long Louis Sachar took to write this one, but they take a long time because authors have to think about these things, how they want their characters to develop. And you guys are doing some great practice with that right now with your realistic fiction stories. So we're going to continue with Chapter 30. Chapter 30. Bradley remained in his seat after everyone else had gone out to recess. He walked to Mrs. Ebble's desk. She was sorting papers. "Mrs. Ebble," he said timidly, "may I use the hall pass? I have to see the counselor." She looked up. "Please?" Normally, Mrs. Ebble would never allow Bradley Chalkers loose in the halls, but something about the way he asked must have changed her mind. "All right, Bradley," she said, then caught herself. "But if you're bad, you'll never be allowed in the halls of this school again." "Thank you." He took the pass off the hook behind her desk and headed out the door. "You're welcome," Mrs. Ebble said to herself. He knocked on the door to Carla's office. "How nice to see you today, Bradley," she greeted him. "I appreciate your coming to see me." He shook her hand, then they sat around the round table. She was wearing the shirt with the squiggles on it. It was the one she wore the first time he saw her. He liked it, but not as much as the one with the mice. "I did my homework last night," he said. Carla beamed. "I'm so proud of—" "I ripped it up." "What?" "I ripped it up. I brought it to school, and I was just about to put it on Mrs. Ebble's desk, and then I ripped it up. And remember yesterday, you guys made some predictions about why he might have ripped up that homework. Let's see if we're going to find out. Let's see if Bradley's going to tell us, okay? Why did Carla started to ask, just like the question we asked, right? "Why did I rip it up?" he asked her first. "I don't know. Why did you?" He shrugged. She shrugged. They both giggled. "I was afraid you'd be mad," Bradley said, when he stopped giggling. Carla shook her head. "You did your homework. That's the important thing." "I'm so very proud of you, Bradley Chalkers." "Going to do all my homework from now on," he promised. "That's wonderful." "But what if I keep ripping it up?" he asked. "Why would you want to do that?" "I don't know. I didn't think I wanted to rip it up today." "The main thing is that you did it, and you learned some things by doing it, didn't you?" "What of means," said Bradley. "What of means?" Carla repeated. "Times," said Bradley. She stared at him, baffled. And that is true. If you see of in a problem that's asking you something, it usually means times, especially with fractions. Okay? So kind of keep that in the back of your head. That's not always true for everything, but you will see some word problems where of does mean times. So you're learning a little trick about your math through your reading. She stared at him, baffled. "Oh, right," she said, as it all suddenly connected for her. "Okay, so even though you ripped up your homework, you still remember what you learned. You didn't rip up your memory. And when Mrs. Ebble gives the next arithmetic test, you'll know how to answer the questions. If they don't change the rules," said Bradley. "What rules?" "Like, what if they decide to make of mean subtraction?" "They won't change the rules," Carla assured him, whoever they are. "But what if I rip up my test, too?" he asked. Carla looked at him as if he was being silly. "Has Mrs. Ebble given you any homework for tomorrow?" she asked. "Tomorrow's Saturday." "Okay, for Monday?" "No, we never have homework over the weekend." He spoke like an expert, like he'd been doing homework for years. "But we have a book report due next week. Only what?" "I don't have a book. And Mrs. Wilcott won't let me check out any from the library." "Well, let's see," said Carla. "Do you think you might know somebody else who might let you borrow a book? Think hard now." Bradley looked around at all the books in her office. "May I borrow one of yours?" he asked. "Please? I won't scribble in it." Carla walked around the table, then picked out a book from a stack on top of one of her bookcases. "It's my favorite," she said as she gave it to Bradley. He read the title and laughed. My Parents Didn't Steal an Elephant by Uriah C. Lasso. He opened to page 1 and read the first sentence. I hate tomato juice. What a great grabber sentence. I'd want to see what that book was going to be about because of the grabber sentence. Nice lead. I hate tomato juice. He thought that was a funny sentence to start a book. He continued reading. Every morning, Aunt Ruth gives me a glass of tomato juice, and every morning I tell her I hate it. Fine dumpling, she always says, don't drink it. She calls me dumpling. Uncle Boris calls me cornflake. They're crazy. One of these days, I'm afraid they're going to try to eat me. He glanced up at Carla, and then returned to the book. My parents are in jail. They got arrested for stealing an elephant from the circus. Only they didn't do it. If they stole an elephant, I'd know about it, wouldn't I? I mean, if your parents stole an elephant, don't you think you'd know about it? I think the elephant just ran away. Her master was always mean to her. He whipped her and made her do stupid tricks. My parents used to complain about that a lot. That's why everybody thinks they stole her. So anyway, that's why I live with my crazy Aunt Ruth and Uncle Boris. If you ask me, they belong to the circus. They're crazy. Uncle Boris always smokes a cigar. It just hangs out of the corner of his mouth. Whenever he kisses my aunt, he swings the cigar out of the way with his tongue and kisses her out the side of his mouth. I bet you think Aunt Ruth doesn't like it when he kisses her that way. Wrong. She always laughs when he does it. Sometimes she smokes a cigar too. I told you they were crazy. Look, he even smokes a cigar while he's drinking tomato juice. The bell rang. Bradley was amazed by how quickly time had passed. Do you want to have lunch together again? He asked. I'm sorry. I'm having lunch with the president of the school board, said Carla. I'd much rather eat lunch with you. He didn't mind too much. At least he had her book to read. They shook hands. Then he walked back to class. He placed the hall pass back on the hook and took his seat. He knew he'd write a good book report because he'd had such a good book to read. I just hope I don't rip it up. Chapter 31. What you doing, Bradley? Asked Ronnie. He's reading, Bartholomew replied nastily. He says he doesn't want to be disturbed. He thinks he's too good for us now that he does his homework. Oh, be quiet and let him read if that's what he wants to do, said Ronnie. Thanks, Ronnie, said Bradley. I knew you'd understand. I knew you'd understand, mimicked Bartholomew. Ronnie understood. She knew about Carla. Bradley returned to his book. Uncle Boris and Aunt Ruth are married. I bet you thought you already knew that, except you're not as smart as you think you are. They were my uncle and aunt even before they got married. Uncle Boris is my mother's brother, and Aunt Ruth is my father's sister. They didn't even know each other until my parents got arrested for stealing an elephant. They both came here to take care of me. Ha! They fell in love and got married a week later. It was sickening. You're lucky you weren't here. I've been cheated out of an aunt and an uncle. If they had each married somebody else, then I'd have 2 aunts and 2 uncles. Now I only have 1 aunt and 1 uncle. I wonder what happened to the aunt and uncle I don't have. I wonder if they married each other too. Bradley looked up. He tried to make sense out of the last paragraph. It made him think. A lot of parts in the book made him think. That was one of the things he liked about it. It made him think about his father too, and why the man who shot him wasn't in jail. All right, I want you to turn and talk for a minute. What's Bradley doing here as he reads this book?